Hi everyone, this is Krista Soria. I'm one of the instructors for the 3000 level leadership minor courses. Today I'm going to be doing a brief presentation about getting started with research for your complexity project assignment. We're going to be talking about how to develop a research question and sub-questions, how to create a list of keywords pertinent to this project, how to distinguish peer-reviewed from non-peer-reviewed resources, and then finally how to conduct searches in the library or Google Scholar for some of your sources. Let's begin by talking about how to develop research questions. It's important to think very broadly about some of the goals of the 3000 level project to help you narrow down your research questions. So one of the goals is to understand through a very academic or research-based lens why it's important to build communities. The leadership minor was very intentional about developing this 3000 level class about community building for several reasons. One important reason is that leadership is relational. Leadership is all about developing relationships with others. You can certainly be a leader of one, of course, but that would be lonely and isolating and it would take a lot of work, right? Because you'd be the only person sort of doing the work at that point. But the purpose of leadership is to develop these relationships within communities so as to unite others and use the gifts of others to develop social change, right? To engage in the work of meeting a vision of an organization or to undertake necessary tasks for whatever organization or cause or movement might be happening. So it's important to build communities, and the leadership minor recognizes this, but we'd like you to explore this importance through academic and research-based lenses. You also know that it's that it's challenging to build communities. As a student in the 3000 class, you might be struggling and wrestling with how do I build a community with all these different people. You might also be a person who in your personal life is also sort of challenged with fitting into a community or belonging to a community or developing a community of other people as well. So there are some challenges of building communities that we'd like you to explore with the specific focus on the barriers or challenges that face some populations of college students in higher education. Because you are all students in higher education, this very much connects to your real lived experience as students, but it connects those personal experiences with academic research. And then finally, we'd like you to develop and explore ways to support the sense of belonging and community integration of students who are from backgrounds different from your own. So when you choose a population or a group to focus on, we would encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and to connect with other people and to learn more about the experiences of students who are different from you. We like to say that the world is bigger than you, right? You know what it means to join a community and to be successful in a community based on your own experience. But what are those experiences like for people who are a little bit different from you? That's one of the primary goals of this particular project. And why do we care about any of this at all? Well, America as a whole is becoming more fractured and divisive. A lot of people like to say America is a melting pot of all these different cultures and people, but really it operates more like a salad bowl on many of occasions with individuals from different groups not working in cooperation to achieve effective social change. As it relates to higher education specifically, we're not a meritocracy. We were not all born with the exact same chances of being successful, whether that's pursuing a college degree, completing a college degree, entering into the workforce, whatever those goals might be. The higher education system is a system of inequality, much like our overall structure of society is a system of inequality. And we'd like you to explore some of those tensions about what it means to develop communities amid these genuine social barriers for certain groups of people. And then finally, we know that, joining communities, being a part of community, having a sense of belonging, these are all really positive experiences, and they can enhance individuals' overall thriving and success in life. And so it's important to explore all of these tensions, these benefits of joining communities, the importance of building communities, yet also the challenges that really exist for some groups of people. So as we get started, it's important to define your population of interest, but it's also important to consider that identities are complex. We're social creatures. We have all of these social identities that intersect in different ways to give us a unique experience. And I share this as a framework because it's important to understand that we can't box people in just by one element of their identity, although in this project we're asking you to explore that one element of their identity. So as an example, I was a first-generation college student, and I'm going to look at first-generation students for the rest of this presentation as an example of a population that you could also explore for this complexity project. So as the first person in my family to go to college, I've also earned a PhD, which is an important part of my scholarly academic identity. I also identify very strongly as a member of the working class, yet in contradiction, I work very much in a middle class culture, and there's a lot of tension there around that, sort of being working class, having language of a working class person and ideals of working classness, but also operating in the middle class culture of higher ed. I'm also a metalhead, and that influences my relationships with people and how I understand and sort of see the world. And I'm also a woman. And all of those things sort of make me uniquely me, right? There's other elements of my identity that I didn't share here, but, race, ethnicity, thinking about my spirituality or religion, my ability or disability, my sexual orientation, all of these social identities make me a unique person that makes me different from other first-generation students who might be, for example, a first-generation student of color who identifies as middle class and listens to country music and is a man. That person would have a very different lived experience than I might have as a first-generation student. So I share that to give you a sort of an understanding that we acknowledge that identities are more than just sort of one label. And as you research, consider that intersectionality of identities and how that might bear on students' experiences. Much like individuals' identities are complex, this project is complex. It's complex because research intersects in different ways. You are not just solely researching the experiences of first-generation students, as I will continue in my example, but you're also exploring the complexities of leadership development for first-generation students, of belonging, of involvement, of community development for first-generation college students. So you're developing these sort of different strands of research that kind of intersect all together in your research project. So as you develop a question, one primary question might be, what's the complexity of community building or joining communities for first-generation college students? And some sub-questions along these lines might be, what are some barriers to students' engagement? What might be some barriers to their leadership development or their leadership efficacy? How do these barriers influence students' collegiate experiences? What does that mean? And then what can we do to help these students develop a sense of belonging to a particular community? So those might be some research questions that would follow along with that grand overarching question. And your task then is to go through and answer those sub-research questions as a sort of way of getting at an answer to the larger question. So how do we do that? Well, it's important to develop a list of keywords, but before we do that, it's important to frame your project. So answering basic questions like, who is your population? What's known about them? What do we know about your population? Why is community important for those groups? What's leadership like for those groups? What's at stake? If we don't do anything to help these students, what could we lose? What could we gain? What's the potential for leadership and community to benefit either the students or the community itself to benefit from these students? How can community developers, and those could be students looking to engage other students, staff members, faculty, whomever, how can those people who are interested in developing community, how can they work to enhance community for this population? What are some actual concrete steps that can be taken? Your rhetorical stance is, why does this matter? So in other words, much like I'm asking for you to put into your pocket that we acknowledge, and we hope that you acknowledge that identities are intersectional and people can't just be put into a box. I'd also like you to put into your pocket that this whole time you're going to tell us why this matters. The reader of your report is going to ask that question over and over. It's great, I'm learning about this group, but why should I care? Why does this matter enough to do anything about it? As you're making your claims, it's important to understand that anything that you write needs to be supported by evidence. And as you think about the claims that you develop, you're going to need to develop key words in your research to get you to answer those claims. So a poorly written statement would be something like, the challenge of invitation for first-generation college students is that they are too busy because many have jobs. So I want to know, one, why is invitation important? Why does that matter for developing communities, right? So substantiate that first. And then secondly, what do you mean by many have jobs? Is many to you 1 out of 10 people, 1 out of 20 people, or are we talking 19 out of 20 first-generation students have jobs? Just get really specific there with these numbers so that you get, again, why should we care? Why does this matter, right? A better written sentence would be, well, invitation is a key component of community building, and you're substantiating that by referencing Block, who writes all about invitation as a key component of community building. While invitation is a key component of community building, invitation is challenging for first-generation college students because 75% of those students are employed full-time on average. Now we're really getting somewhere, right? I don't believe your first sentence. I just don't believe it. I don't believe challenge is important because you haven't proven it, and I don't know how many have jobs, so I don't care about it, right? But when you get us those numbers, we really get a sense of this matters, and here's the extent to which it matters, and so on. Another example could be there are a lot of first-generation college students in higher education. Okay, again, what's a lot? 1%, 95%, get specific. A statement like, Jehinger suggested as many as 25% of college students across the nation are the first in their families to attend higher education. That's much better, right? Now we know how many. So your version of a lot could be different than my version of a lot, but let's just clear the air, provide some evidence, and enter in those resources with some data, some facts, and some statistics to back up your claims. Almost everything that you write should be supported by evidence in some manner. So put that in your pocket as well. So if you're to think about researching and developing keywords, you could start by just entering in your research question into a search engine, right? So what's the complexity of first-generation college students' leadership development? Well, I've got the library website up here. Let's just take a look, right? So those will be my keywords. What does that look like? Well, when I entered into the library, we get 3 resources, one of which is awesomely about functional bowel disorders, so probably not helpful. Another one seems to be about pregnancy, and then this one is a history of medical information. Obviously, that's not helpful. If I were to enter that into Google, we'd probably get pretty similar results. We do get some good stuff here at the beginning, which is a nice report that you could use. But overall, there are some challenges to some of these resources. They don't quite hit on what we want. So that's why we develop keywords. The results that we get are really not great right off the bat. So when we think about keywords, think about developing multiple combinations of words that you would enter into search engines to sort of understand, and to sort of locate information that's broad enough to get you a lot of resources to choose from, but also narrow so that you're not drowning in resources. So the first two, first-generation college students and first-generation undergraduate students, I offer as an example because as you're thinking about researching college students, think about the ways that we describe college students, right? Undergraduates is another way of describing college students. So broaden your search terms. As we think about community, we need to think about the things that make up community, right? Peter Block would tell us that community is defined as having a sense of belonging, right? So that should at some point be a part of some of your key terms. When it comes to sense of belonging, it's important to matter, to be a citizen, an active participant in the community, but there's many, many ways of sort of investigating community and leadership and all of these things with your particular population of students. And I've offered just a couple of examples right there. And let me share one more quick example. It's going to be challenging for you. Well, let me talk a little bit about leadership first, and I'll talk about community research. Okay, sorry about that. So as you're researching, you're probably going to come across several scholars who've written a lot about leadership, and those would include John Dugan, Susan Komovitz, Julie Owen, and Laura Austin, and those folks are fantastic. And if you find a resource from one of these folks, you're sort of on the right track. These are some really good superstars in leadership research. You might also find references to the multi-institutional study of leadership, the social change model, and other leadership identity models. Those are also great. So I'm pointing you in these particular directions because you might find some good stuff from these folks. Community leadership is a little bit more tricky, and I'll share an example of that in just a second. But you need to broaden your understanding of what it means to develop community, right? On day one of our class, we don't just say, now form your community. Because in some cases, we don't even understand what that means, right? We don't even know what community looks like. We don't know what it feels like. We haven't defined it yet. We haven't read Peter Block to understand that yet. But think about the many things that comprise students' sense of community. So that could be a sense of belonging. Terrell Strayhorn has written a lot in this area. Student involvement, Alexander Aston. Campus climate. Peter Block has written quite a bit about this, beyond your text. If you go to Peter Block's website, literally peterblock.com, you'll find some additional resources there. But other terms like social support, social integration, engagement, friendship, social capital, mattering, these are all terms that you should consider using as you research community. And here's why, and let me share with you my example. If I want to go to the library and I want to enter in community for college students, right? We're probably going to find some really narrow research about not developing community among college students, but about community college students, right? So I'm seeing community college transfer students, community college students, community college transfer students, right? There's a few more throughout, but really the conversation quickly gets narrowed down to community college students. And that's somewhat of a problem because we're not, you could focus on community college students as a population for sure, but I'm thinking most of you are going to focus more on that four-year college type framework. And if that's the case, then we're going down the wrong track, right? So that's why it's important to say, instead of community college students, how about social integration, right? Let's see what we can find. Social integration for college students, right? Here's some good stuff. Oh, even one of mine shows up. That's kind of fun. But we could also do social support for college students, right? And then we'll see a few things that might pop up here and there. If we do sense of belonging for college students, if I can spell correctly, here we go. Again, we will see, here we have some Hurtado, as I mentioned, and Terrell Strayhorn, who are, both great. And so, these are the types of articles that you'd want to then begin focusing on a little bit more specifically as you're conducting your research. As you start your search, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed resources. Sort of the gold standard is peer review, and that means that each article has undergone some really rigorous academic review by a committee of other PhDs, other faculty, other researchers. Facts are checked. Authors are encouraged to add to literature reviews or change things up to be the best that they can be. So in many ways, they sort of trump books because many books are reviewed by an editor, but not by peers in the field. So I do recommend that you seek a peer-reviewed academic article whenever possible. And there's filters both in Google Scholar and also in the library, like this little guy right here, where you can click on articles from peer-reviewed journals. And that's lovely because that gets you the articles that have been reviewed by peers, and they're less likely to be like newspaper articles, for example, or articles in magazines like Cosmopolitan, for example, or Maxim, right? You're going to get the rigorous academic research stuff. As you begin researching, you might ask, well, what's the best way for me the best sort of medium for me to use in research? Is it the library, Google Scholar, Google, Bing? Let's give a really quick overview of those differences. So I'm going to enter in this article right here into these different search engines, and we're going to do one at a time. So there's the library. Here is straight up Google. Oops, hit down a few extra things there. Straight up Google. I'm going to do that in Google Scholar, and then I'm also going to do it in Bing. And we will look at all of our results. Cute Panda and Bing today. Okay, so at the library, boom, first article. This is exactly the one that I wanted. Click on View It. Open it up. We're going to download it when it shows up in a second. And here's the article, right? Pretty slick. Great. In Google, oh, the first one here, that looks like the article. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. And I'm going to click on download full text. Great, that we're moving along, right? Oh no, we have to purchase the article. This is the benefit of going to the library. And you should never, ever purchase any academic resources. Get everything for free through the library. By the way, I'm an author of this article and I don't ever get any money from this. The money just goes to the journal. So never pay for this stuff. Not only on sort of the principle of, but I never get paid for any of my research. And so, so just don't pay, right? Don't pay. You shouldn't have to pay. Google Scholar is cool because if you're on campus, you get a connection to the U of M library automatically. Super cool. If you are off campus, go to your settings, click on library links, and then type in the U of M library and it will pop up for you. And even if you're off campus, every time that you use Google Scholar, they will also check to see that they have it at the U of M library. So very cool. Oh, awesome, Bing. Oh, looks like it's right at the top. Let's click on that. We're going to go through Eric, it looks like. Eric seems legit, right? Well, let's keep on clicking all the way through. Okay, download text, and I'm going to be prompted to pay for it again, right? So the big lesson is use Google Scholar and use the library as your two big resources for this project. Never pay for any articles. Search the library first. If the library doesn't have it, use an interlibrary loan, and that should work for you just fine. Articles, as I mentioned earlier, are somewhat preferred over books. Policy organization research is fine if you're going to find some stuff on the web, but cite it like a book or like a report. And then my final piece of advice too is when you can, cite the original resource. So going back to my article, if we were to pull that back up, the first line, I've essentially written that the number of first-generation college students is increasing over time, and this is where I got that source. And again, any claim that you write, right, should be really supported by facts and statistics, and that's what I did right here. Instead of citing Choi as cited in Soria and Stebleton, it would be fine for you to go down and find Choi, right? To go straight to that original reference and find that one and cite that one, and that's perfectly appropriate. You could also cite Soria, because I'm also saying that, but it's great sometimes to go to the original resource as another way of sort of expanding your research possibilities. If you have any questions, you're absolutely welcome to email me at ksoria@umn.edu or touch base with your leadership minor instructor as well. So we're happy to help you out. Good luck investigating these very complex issues. Just remember to consider the intersectionality of students' identities. Remember to consider the multifaceted and complex nature of this research project. And think through some of your search terms as well to sort of broaden but also narrow down your topic of focus as you're walking through your research. And don't forget to use the library and Google Scholar. Those are all really excellent resources for your use. So thanks. Have a great day. Good luck researching and have fun. Thank you.